So earlier today at work, I had a conversation with my assistant manager about systemic racism, and as it turns out, I actually have a lot to say about it. And as it also turns out, I'm decently educated on the matter, so I might be able to have some solid footing here, especially since I'm on home turf. What with being a a black and all. Um, So I guess I'll start off with the statistic that I see thrown around a lot among right-leaning political commentators. It's you might have heard of it. It's called 1350. If you don't understand what that is, I'll run through it real quick. Basically, uh, despite being only 13% of the population, African Americans commit 50% of the crime. Now, this statistic's actually factual, um, but that it is nothing but a descriptive claim. It doesn't really say a lot. It's you have to follow up with what conclusion you can come up with after that, and there's really only two answers to that question when you come down to it. It is either nature or nurture. Today, I want to get into why I think it's nurture. Now, if it's nature, then that is the implication that it's like a hereditary thing. It's just the way black people are, that sort of thing. And I guess my rebuttal would be, why am I different in that case? Because I've never had the urge to do those things. So if it's hereditary, did the gene just skip over me? Like, did I just suppress the gene that gives me the urge to do crime and gang bang and smoke crack and sell drugs and all of that good stuff? Is it because my grandmother's original name was Schultz? That sort of thing. I wouldn't think so. I think it has everything to do with upbringing and the environment you're around. Because I grew up middle class. I never had to struggle for anything. I was always fed. We never had financial issues, so it never really crossed my mind that I had to go sell drugs for profit because that was never a situation that I'd come across. I was never that desperate. But some people aren't that lucky. Um, and yeah, I believe I'm a huge believer in humans being products of their environment. Humans are only so smart. When you have a limited worldview, you're bound to think a certain way. Um, there's a reason why I quote talk white. It's because I wasn't around ghetto people like that growing up. I mean, I was I had lived in a couple ghetto neighborhoods, but I never had a ghetto lifestyle. It was just the apartment complexes that I grew up in. Well, some of them at least. So I guess if I'm trying to defend my nurture position, I have to explain how we got here in the present day and why African American communities in inner cities behave the way they do. And this political commentator that I watch actually has a pretty good analogy for this. So let's take a a runner from the 1960s, and let's say someone kneecaps him. They just shoot him in the knee. They can no longer compete in races because they can't run. Now, let's say in the 1970s, the racing committee decides that you can't kneecap racers anymore. Okay, that's cool. That's great. No one else gets kneecapped. But the guy who got kneecapped back in the 1960s still has a bad knee, so he still needs help with that knee. So if you don't do anything about it, he still cannot compete. And that's kind of the situation we see African Americans in today. Um, Let me explain. Let's see. Where should I start? So I guess we should start with the history of the African American race in America. So we were slaves up until the 1800s. I think it was the 1800s. We were released, and all that animosity towards the slaves at the time didn't just disappear because slavery was gone. People still thought that they were superior to black people at that time, and so Some did everything in their power to make sure that was the case. That's why we had the Jim Crow laws, and when those segregation laws went away, we had redlining, which is when certain districts of a city were systematically denied certain commodities that other districts would, like bank loans, for a basic example. And so yeah, like that combined with the fact that what is it called? Class mobility in America is really bad. Poor people in this country tend to stay poor, that sort of thing. So many some I guess you could call leftists would argue that it is a systematic issue. That's where the term systematic racism comes from, because African Americans and other poor people, African Americans and other minorities and poor people were barred from certain advantages because of things they couldn't control. And so even if there isn't any systematic racism at all, the issue of class mobility is still present. That is to imply that like there is no systematic racism. I did a video on police brutality, and I intentionally left out the bits of the statistics talking about African Americans because I didn't want it to be a partisan video. And then I went on to make many partisan videos after that, so a lot of good that did. But yes, if you take a look at the statistics, they generally lean towards black people getting a lot of getting the short end of the stick. You know, more drug arrests for the same. Let's see, how does it go? Black people are often charged worse for the same amount of possession of drugs compared to other races like whites. Poorer districts in cities tend to be over policed, which happens to be where a lot of African Americans live, which is why the statistic 1350 is a little bit skewed. Then there's the issue of black on black violence, which is majority of that is actually gang related crime, because gangs sell drugs to bolster their power in communities. And so gangs will fight over territory, and that's where a majority of the violence comes from. What else should I talk about? I think that's good for now. I guess I'll move on. Yes, let's talk about the culture of African Americans. So people try to, I wouldn't say try to, people say instead of it being a systemic issue, it's actually a culture issue. You know, stuff like our rap music is the main cause of these problems. I don't see rap music as like a thing that encourages these things. I see like the poverty that people are in encourages people to do these things. No person wakes up and decides, I'm gonna sell drugs today. I've never seriously considered selling drugs because it's illegal and it's risky, and I don't have to because I don't need to do that in order to pay my bills and live, or pay for my mom's medical bills that she'll need to pay for or else she'll die. You know, something like that. The desperate, what is it? What is the saying? Desperate calls call for desperate measures. Something like that. So yeah, nobody grows up thinking I'm going to sell drugs when I get older. That's like something that is perpetuated by the environment they live in, because it may be their only option. There may the jobs around don't pay very much. You know, you might not be able to afford the insurance, and gangs are a way to be able to acquire the funds that you need to get ahead in life. So yeah, the idea that like gang culture and rap perpetuates, like encourages the idea negatively is kind of bad. And yeah, people will say that rap music isn't music, And I get it. Like you might not like rap music, you might detest it, but I think it's a little weird to gatekeep entire genres of music like that. Like it's like music is subjective, and I think there is a severe lack of understanding of what hip hop actually is. The core of hip hop is the struggle. You know, it's all about, you know, struggling to get by, making it, you know, powering through and making it regardless of those struggles. And you know, the stuff you hear on the radio, like the gangster rap. You know what I'm talking about? The uh, let me think of some quick gangster rap bars. Uh, yeah, yeah. Uh, you talking a lot of crap. Make me wanna bust a cap. Make that thing go blap blap. You know what I mean. Gangster rap, and it's a, and while it is not a full representation of the culture, it's a part of it. I believe that hip hop as a whole is a bit of a microcosm of our society as a whole. Except it's the perspective comes from people living in these inner cities, in these really poor neighborhoods, and their struggle to get out. Um, that's why you hear a lot of rappers talk about how, like, yeah, I was really poor, but then I sold a bunch of drugs and I rap really good, so now I have millions of dollars. Like that's a huge thing that people rap about. And something you'll notice is that every rapper raps about money, because money controls the entire culture, the entire world. And you know, like, cash rules everything around me. Cream get the money. Dollar bills, y'all. Like, come on. Let me think of some more good ones. I guess Cream. Cash rules everything around me. Cream get the money. Dollar bills, y'all. That works fine. I'll just go with that for now. Um, so yes, and the thing about bad rap or gangster rap or rap that is a bad influence on people is, I listened to a lot of that stuff when I was a kid. I listened to a decent amount of Lil Wayne because that was my mom's favorite rapper. I don't know why. Um, and yeah, he says a lot of bad things about busting caps and disrespecting women and selling and doing drugs. And I don't disrespect women or bust caps in people's asses or do drugs most of the time. And it's just like music is music. Like, I think another good example of what people consider like bad music for the culture is uh, Cardi B and Megan. What is her name? Megan the Stallion's WAP, which is actually interesting because I consider like every piece of hip hop music a commentary on the culture, and I think WAP is a good example of that because women are generally objectified in American culture and in a lot of other places. You know, they're seen as sexual objects of sexuality. You know, there's something to pursue and obtain. They're not really seen as fully human. And the interesting thing about WAP is it's like, in a way, it's like it's a take on like sex sells, and these women know this. That's why they make music for these audiences, is because they know this stuff sells. You know, no woman would go get an OnlyFans if she wasn't financially incentivized to do that. If she made enough money off of her regular minimum wage job, she would probably never consider it. But we live in the real world. Minimum wage jobs don't pay a lot. OnlyFans pays more than most jobs. And the thing is that we always blame the women when they go and do these things, when they decide to sell their body for money. And the thing is that they wouldn't do it if there wasn't an audience for it. you know, how should I put it? And it's like we always blame the women when in reality it's society's fault that things are the way they are. And no black teenager just wakes up one day and decides, I'm gonna sell some drugs. That sounds really fun right now. Or no girl wakes up one day and decides that she's gonna sell her body for profit because she has no dignity. These are financially incentivized things. People are struggling financially. That's why the culture is perpetuated in the way that it is. I hope this is making sense. But this is a video about systemic racism, so I'll back it up a little bit. What else should I talk about? I think a decent example of something. This has been a bit of a hot button term. I think like white privilege. Some people really don't like it when people say white privilege, but there's this Twitter video that I find really funny. It was happening during the new civil rights protest, like after George Floyd's death and all that. It was a line. It was like a barricade of white college girls all holding hands while a bunch of colored people in the background were protesting, and then the cops were on the other side like, we gotta get to these protesters and break them up, but all these white girls are in front of us. We can't really do anything. And I've always find that picture funny. Yeah, it's hard to explain. I've been talking for 20 minutes and I feel like I haven't even scratched the surface. Maybe I should do an actual an analytical video on this topic and do an analysis. But maybe someday. I don't know. I just think the fact that there's just so much footage of just police brutality in general, it just says a lot, and I feel like people aren't willing to look at that. And to be honest, I really don't think this isn't what the period that we live in right now is not a period of like severe systemic racism. It's more of a class warfare type of deal, where the people who the working class are pitted against each other so that they can't focus on the real enemy, which is the people that are making them this poor. People in the government, the people who fund the people in the government, that sort of thing. I think class consciousness is the best way to go about things, and this whole idea that black people are, how should I put this? I think I should just make a final statement at this point. It's funny. Every time I turn on this camera, I'm so confident. Or I guess every time I have the ideas in my head of what I want to talk about, it's like crystal clear. But whenever I get in front of the camera and start recording, I'm a mess. I get so nervous, and I don't know. It's weird. Like, I think maybe this video was a bad idea because it wasn't as fleshed out as it could have been. But I guess I have to start somewhere, right? Did I cover everything? All right, I'll whip up a final statement and end this thing. I'll just put it this way. I believe that systemic racism is alive and well. Because you don't go from like this burning animosity for another race of people where you believe that you are superior to that race, and then 2 centuries later everything's worked out. Like, maybe in the best case scenario where everybody was working as hard as they could to put an end to it, but it really hasn't been the case. the South was in a period of reformation, and that kind of ended after Abe Lincoln's assassination, if I remember correctly. And we never truly got back to doing that. And I'm 100% confident that there are still people alive today with power that believe that black people are lesser people. That's just how I feel, I guess. And it's just the indoctrination of several generations of people to say that there are no people left in power that believe that blacks are lesser is just kind of, I don't want to say disingenuous. It just feels like when you know the history, you'd come to the conclusion that it's still not 100% as good as it should be. I don't know. I probably didn't do a good job making my case here, but all the more reason to actually do an analysis on this, I guess.